Well, now that we are finished with 2023, now is the time to review the performance of the site as a whole for the entire year. Before we do that, we're going to look at the last 3 months of 2023 in a bit more detail and see what we can glean from that performance and how data is presented on the SolarEdge Energy monitoring site. We're also going to look at the performance of the battery in a bit more detail, looking at efficiency and looking at control opportunities with that battery. We're going to look at how we can use that battery to take advantage of the Octopus Energy savings scheme that we have over the winter time on particular days, and how I've used it this particular winter. And finally, I want to talk about the Octopus Energy Intelligent Go tariff. It has been a fantastic tariff to be on ever since I signed up to it at the beginning of October. Now, if you haven't watched my previous videos, my name is Anthony and I own a 9 kilowatt solar panel array up here in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Not much performance on a day like today, but there are many videos which have discussed the performance that we've had in great detail throughout the previous years. So for the last 3 months of 2023, you can see that in October, we generated 356 kilowatt hours of electricity. It's very similar to the previous years where we had 358 and 322 kilowatt hours. So there's nothing particularly remarkable about October in that regard. In November, obviously much less, 120 kilowatt hours of electricity. And that is comparable to the year 2022 and the year 2021. You'll notice 2021 and 2022 are a bit lower than 2021. These two have a battery involved here. But if we go to December, again, you will see that production at first glance looks a lot lower. 41 kilowatt hours compared to 76 and 72 kilowatt hours in 2020 and 2021. Let's use December as an example because something strange is going on with the production figures. If we scroll up, you will see that we've got the numbers for 2023 in more detail. And you can see here we've got a different number for production. It's not 41, it's 58.85. And it gets stranger still. Here we've got some numbers for the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th, and they are suggesting that there was no production whatsoever. But if we click on the 11th, just as an example, you can see actually there was production. And this is a strange way of accounting. If we see what's going on here, you can see that we're charging up the car and we're charging up the hot water controller, and where you've got this 5 kilowatts here, that's where we're charging up the battery. I think the formula for calculating production is not just the amount produced by the solar panels. It is also related to how that solar production is used. My experience of the accounting is that if the solar production is used for grid consumers, for your home consumers, then it is counted. If the solar production is used to charge up the battery, then it is not counted. However, if the battery is discharged, then the discharge of the battery is counted as part of the solar production, minus whatever electricity is imported into the battery from the grid. And there is something which is not accounted for in these production figures. So that is the reason why December in particular has very poor production figures when you look at the monthly summaries and even the daily summaries in some of these examples. As you can see, we had enough production for certain points of the day, 450 watts. That's not too bad, and that was sufficient to cover my electrical loads for a small portion of the day. The next question is, how has the performance fared for the whole year? This is the first year that we've had where we've had a battery for the entire year in terms of performance. So the question is, has that reduced our imports all that much by having a battery? And how much has that reduction in import been worth to the site? So for the year as a whole, we generated quite a bit less than on previous years. We generated 6.87 megawatt hours of electricity. If we compare that to 2022, 6.54 megawatt hours. Of course, we had a period of lack of accountability in September. It was actually more like 7.1 megawatt hours. And then in 2021, we had 7.02 megawatt hours. So all told, we're not too far deviating from standard deviations. It is about 3% variation from one year to the next. Now, one thing I will be wanting to point out is how the export and import has changed, as well as the consumption. So in 2021, we didn't have a battery at all, but we did have an electric car for the last 4 months of the year. We imported 1.6 megawatt hours and we consumed 4.06 megawatt hours. If we compare that to 2023, consumption is much higher. And that is on account of the fact that I am driving quite a bit more, especially this autumn and winter time. But our import is lower, in spite of the fact that we have got an electric car for the whole year. That's quite impressive. I'm driving about 15,000 miles a year, thereabouts, and 65% of my electricity for that electric car is coming from my house. So it's responsible for supplying 10,000 miles of driving a year, and yet my import is not much different to what it was in 2021 when I only had an electric car for 4 months of the year. So why is my import quite a bit lower? Well, if we have a look at 2022, we were driving an electric car for the whole year, but we had a battery for the last 3 months. So the actual import was quite a bit higher. It was about 1.92 megawatt hours. Now, if we go back to 2023, what we want to do is see how our consumption has varied according to where it's coming from in a bit more detail. So for that, we go onto the new dashboard. So what you can see here is that 1.45 megawatt hours of consumption came from the grid. But 19% of our consumption came from our batteries. And the interesting thing about this consumption is that this is battery consumption which came from solar power. This is not battery consumption which came from charging up the battery with the grid. And this is one of the reasons why there is a difference between this number here on the new dashboard and the import on the old dashboard. It is not counting grid consumption, which is used to charge up the battery in the winter time. And it's quite interesting. So if we look at the 10th of December as an example, you can see that we have got about 6.5 kilowatts of import, and that is used to charge up the car. And then we've got 3 kilowatts of import, which is used to charge up the hot water controller. But charging up the battery, which uses 5 kilowatts, that is lacking, mysteriously lacking. And it's very peculiar. 6.5 kilowatts of import, that is what you get for charging up the car when the import is being throttled at 50 amps. That is a setting which I have on the Zappi charger. So the accounting for the charging up of this battery here is not being recognized on the site power. And this is for the new dashboard. If we go to the old dashboard for the 10th of December, and here you can see 10th of December on the old dashboard, it does correctly account for battery imports from the grid. So it's a very different way of accounting for things. When it comes to accuracy of the import measurement, I would prefer to use the old dashboard, and in other respects the old dashboard is better. But when it comes to looking at the distribution of how consumption varies from different sources, the new dashboard is indeed more interesting. So one of the things I also want to talk about for the year are the minimum and maximum production figures that we had. In June, for example, the month was the best ever year when it comes to production. And we also had very good production figures for the clearest day of June. And that demonstrates to me that there is no degradation going on with the solar panels yet. However, in December, the best day that we had was not as good as the best day that we had in 2020. And the reason why production figures for December on clear days are decreasing is because the sun is very low on the horizon. It rises only 9 degrees above the horizon up here in Aberdeenshire, and that compares to a maximum rise of 15 degrees in the south of England. So you get considerably more daylight down in England. What does 9 degrees mean? Well, we've got quite a few trees on the horizon, and the difference of 3 years means that we get a bit more partial shading on those solar panels, so we get less production overall. It's not much less, 1.5 kilowatt hours, but it's enough to reduce production, what little we have of it at this time of the year. So we want to talk about returns on the investment which I have been having with the battery system. And the headline is that after 3 years of operation, we have generated just over £4,000 worth of return. So we are nearly 40% paid off on the original investment. Now, of course, there is the battery, which I've added. The original investment was just under £11,000. So we are getting there. And this year in particular, we have generated just under £1,800 worth of return from that investment. So the next question is going to be, how much energy am I expecting to save next year? And I think what's going to be happening next year is that the price of electricity is going to fall. So at the moment, for most of this year, I've been measuring the price against 40 pence per kilowatt hour. Next year, the price for import is going to be measured against 25 to 30 pence per kilowatt hour. What I will say is that the export price is fixed until October 2024. So as a minimum, I should get £1,000 of export if I was to take all of this production and export it to the grid. That's the worst case scenario. But with these proportions here, so 49% is exported and then the rest is used at home, I am calculating £1,370 worth of return predicted for the year 2024, and that is assuming an import price of 25 pence per kilowatt hour during the daytime. And yes, that is lower than what I am paying right now, but if you look at the futures prices, they are coming down, and they're coming down quite strongly. So I think it's going to be good news for those people who haven't invested in solar panels. But for those people who have invested in solar panels, they're going to not generate so much return next year. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is the battery. And I've got some new insights in terms of battery energy efficiency and how that varies with load in different scenarios. My understanding of battery efficiency has evolved over this period of time. My last communication about battery efficiency was to look at the API information. And in here, you've got two tags. One is called lifetime energy charged, and the other one is called lifetime energy discharged. And if you take the discharged as a fraction of the charged energy, you will be under the impression that the efficiency of the battery is very good indeed. However, it's not that straightforward. And to illustrate this, I've got one example here. So I want to use the 29th of December as an example of what battery efficiency looks like. We charged up the battery with 4.28 kilowatt hours of solar electricity during the day. And that was enough to bring our battery up from 0% up to 42%. But look how much the battery has drained by. 42% down to 29%. That's 1.3 kilowatt hours equivalent. And then we've got 0.7 kilowatt hours over here. So all told, we have seen 2 kilowatt hours worth of electricity being discharged from the battery. And yet our actual home consumption was 0.67 kilowatt hours. So 0.67 kilowatt hours out of a total discharge equivalent of 2, that is a 33% efficiency. Very poor indeed. But I use this as a specific example because the consumption throughout the whole day was when I was not at home. And you can see that our overall home consumption is about 30 watts, rising up to 90 to 100 watts when the fridge freezer or the boiler kicks in. If we then compare that with another day, this is the 19th of September. Here we have an Octopus Energy savings session. So what I did was that I discharged my battery for precisely 1 hour at 5 kilowatts. We started off with 97% battery. We ended up with 45% battery at the end of it. And by my calculations, that is 94% efficient. So what that tells me is that the efficiency of the battery is a function of the discharge rate. The higher your discharge rate, the more efficient your battery will become. What I have found out through all of my calculations is that the battery has an internal consumption which varies between 30 and 67 watts. And this is consumption before the energy has even been discharged to the inverter. The inverter has got its own consumption, which is about 20 to 30 watts. So all told, you're looking at about 100 watts of consumption between your battery and your inverter. So the more load you have in your house, the more efficient your battery inverter combination is going to be. My best advice is to leave your battery switched off during the cheap period. As you can see, overnight, I'm on Octopus Intelligent Go, and you can see I just have the battery switched off until 5:30 in the morning because it is more efficient to leave it switched off than it is to have it running at an efficiency of just 33%. Bear in mind, the ratio between the daytime and the nighttime prices is about 400%. So a 33% efficiency will only just be worth it. So one thing I just want to point out is that behind the battery, we do have heatsink fins. So the design of the battery is one where heat is being produced. And if we look at this with a thermal camera, you will see that these heatsink fins are just gently warm. It's only about 3 or 4 degrees warmer than the remaining body of the battery. If I put my head over it, there is a very gentle warmth. So the thing about a battery mounted outside is that that heat being produced by the battery is indeed wasted, but when the battery is inside the property, then that waste heat being produced will be contributing towards heating up the property. So it's not all entirely wasted, depending on the setup of your battery. Now, one of the things I have done this winter is that I've signed up finally for the Octopus Energy saving scheme. And the interesting thing about this scheme is that it is not just open for people to reduce their peak time consumption. It is also open for people to export energy from their battery during these saving sessions. I have been earning I think it's £2.25 per kilowatt hour, and I've signed up for 2 energy savings, and that has netted me about £18 with this battery. That's not bad for just 2 energy saving sessions. I have missed out on previous energy saving sessions in earlier part of December. I was trying to sign up for the SolarEdge Energy Saving Scheme. That gives me £2 per kilowatt hour, but during the sign-up process, I found that they were requiring a serial number for the home information device. And I don't have this device. I think they call it an IHD, in-home device. Why they want that, I don't know, but I don't have one with Octopus Energy. I used to have one with Bulb Energy a long time ago and with First Utility, but I've never felt the need to have one. So essentially, I'm excluded from the SolarEdge scheme. But the good news is that the Octopus Energy scheme is fit for purpose for export of your battery electricity. So I also want to talk about the Octopus Energy Intelligent Go tariff. This is a fantastic tariff, and the interesting feature about the Intelligent Go tariff is that it allows you to charge up your car for 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. That's nothing new. You can do it for 6 hours each night normally, and you're essentially giving charging control of your car to Octopus Energy when it's parked in your house. And not only can you charge up your car for 6 hours, you can also run your heat pump if you've got it. You can run any heavy consumer load in your house during that same 6 hour period. But it's more interesting than that. You can also charge up your car outside that 6 hour period for 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. There are times when I have returned home with 6% charge at 5:30 in the evening after doing a long trip from Glasgow. And I needed a full charge the very next day when we were taking off, going out into the Highlands of Scotland on our next trip. And what it will do is that it will enable your car to charge up at predefined sessions which are determined by Octopus Energy. And you will then get a 100% charge the next day at your desired departure time, which in my instance was departing at 7:30 in the morning. And it was absolutely fine for that. That's the beauty of the Octopus Go Intelligent tariff as opposed to the Octopus Go tariff. The Octopus Go tariff is a higher price and it's only for 4 hours each night. It's an interesting tariff as well for one other thing. It allows you to export electricity at 15 pence per kilowatt hour on their outgoing fixed tariff. So you can import at 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour overnight, and you can export at 15 pence per kilowatt hour during the daytime. There isn't much export to be had at this time of the year. I'm generating almost no surplus electricity whatsoever. It's only in March that I'm starting to generate surpluses, and with the heat pump coming up, it will probably be extended to the middle or end of March before I start generating significant surpluses. One thing about the outgoing fixed tariff is that it is indeed fixed until October next year. So even if the wholesale prices take a dive, the tariff is guaranteed until October next year. The other thing I want to do is compare it with the Octopus Flux tariff. Now, the export price for Flux is 17.5 pence per kilowatt hour compared to 15 pence. So it is, at first glance, more attractive to go with Flux. But what you trade is the ability to charge up your car overnight on a cheap tariff. And that's really important. The previous arrangement of charging up with surplus solar power during the daytime with my car meant that I did not have the opportunity to do a long drive one day and then do another long drive the very next day on a cheap tariff. I would have been forced to charge up my car overnight at a more expensive tariff on Octopus Flux. So by using the Octopus Go Intelligent tariff, I have essentially turned my solar panels into an export-driven product. I will get more money by exporting as much electricity as possible and then using my battery to run my household loads and trying also to shift some of those household loads into the nighttime period. So I think it's a very interesting development in terms of electricity tariffs, and it will no doubt change overall. You can't have too much of a good thing. I do think those tariffs will eventually change again, but in the meantime, I'm going to take full advantage of it. Well, I hope you found this video very interesting. It's always interesting to see how the system has changed over the years, but it's also interesting to see what financial return it is yielding to me as a system owner over those years. It's been phenomenal last year in 2023, nearly £1,800 for the whole year. So that's it as far as this video is concerned. I will hope to be making new videos in the near future, and in the meantime, I'll talk to you again very soon.